All right, man, peace. So legendary comedian Dave Chappelle made an appearance on the CBS Morning News. He was interviewed by Gayle King. I thought that the interview touched on a lot of interesting topics. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Dave Chappelle has been making everybody laugh for 30 years. He studied theater at a performing arts school and high school in Washington, D.C., and he started sneaking into comedy clubs when he was just 14. His career exploded after Chappelle's show on Comedy Central. Then he suddenly abandoned the show at the height of his success, and people were very confused.
I don't think that anyone was confused as to why Dave Chappelle decided to quote-unquote abandon the success that he was having on his TV show. I think that he made it relatively clear that he felt like Hollywood had him in a vice grip. Now, do I believe, as many people on the internet tend to believe, that Dave Chappelle decided to reject the $50 million deal because he did not want to engage in any form of Luciferianism? No, I don't believe that. I believe that he was already engaging in Luciferianism. I believe that he was subjected to a certain amount of programming for the majority of his life. I just believe that he snapped. I believe that he went through some form of destructive programming and he could not deal with it, and he decided to flee. But I'll touch on that some more as this interview goes on.
But now Netflix has just released his third stand-up comedy special. Chappelle often shies away from interviews, but he sat down with us for a rare conversation about his life and his career.
Let me say this quickly before the interview starts. The vast majority of the high-level entertainers in Hollywood are nothing but operatives. All right? They're what are known as pre-programmed multiples. They have what's known as dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. It's known as MK Ultra mind control programming. If they're not raised in the programming, they are eventually brought into the programming if they're allowed to get into Hollywood, because that's their role. Their role is to continue to help cast spells over the masses of people. That's why it's called Hollywood. Okay? The Holly King was the god of witchcrafts. But that's neither here nor there. Dave Chappelle shows all the signs of being a program multiple. If you ever watched the film, Born Identity or the Born Identity series starring Matt Damon, one of the core themes of that series is that their agents always come back to home base. Hollywood is home base for Dave Chappelle. So no matter how far he fled, they knew that he would come back.
You know, but there was all sorts of speculation. Is he crazy? Did he have a breakdown? Is he on drugs? And the more, if you really read the Dave Chappelle story, it almost seems like it was more peace of mind than it was about money.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to a guy. He basically said to me that comedy is a reconciliation of paradox.
Look at Dave Chappelle. He looks like a burnout, man. That man, and I know that there will be people in the comments, that's not the real Dave Chappelle. That's a clone. Look, who knows? I don't get too much into that, brothers. Is cloning technology real? Yes, it is. Am I going to sit here and say that this Dave Chappelle here is definitely a clone? I'm not qualified to say that. Who knows? Could be, may not be. The film Get Out alludes to the cloning technology, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get there when we get there. But Dave Chappelle certainly looks broken. He looks fractured. And he was certainly someone who was going through, in my view, destructive programming or self-destruct programming.
Well, I think that was a irreconcilable moment for me. That I was in this very successful place, but the emotional content of it didn't feel anything like what I imagined success should feel like. It didn't feel right.
The reason why it didn't feel right, bro, is because you had been subjected to Luciferianism for the majority of your life. And as they allowed you to ascend up that ladder of success in Hollywood, you were hoping that stardom would be worth all the demonism that you'd had to go through to get there. Because believe me, they don't subject you to Luciferian practices when you reach the zenith of your career. You have to indulge in those practices from the door. So I've never been one to believe this theory that Dave Chappelle turned down the $50 million because, he was just so moral. He turned it down, and he just would not allow himself to fall into that morass of depravity. No, I don't believe that. I believe that it just got to be too much, as we've seen with many other celebrities or quote unquote child stars, people who were raised in the programming.
This is it. This is the first episode. Y'all ready? Some sketch comedy. Y'all ready to see some sketches?
Do you miss the Chappelle show?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, but Chappelle show's like breaking up with a girl, and you still like her, but in your mind, like, that bitch is crazy. I'm not.
Ding.
I'm not going back. I do like to move around when I'm in thought.
Chappelle not only left the show walking away from a $50 million deal, he left the country, going to South Africa to escape.
Dave Chappelle looked like a heroin addict to me, allegedly. That's how he talks, and that's how he moves. He moves like somebody who's on heroin. And for those of you paying attention, please look, he's in the all black. You'll oftentimes see comedians, particularly Kevin Hart, they rock the all black for Saturn worship, okay? All black represents the worship of Saturn, known as the hidden god. That was once again, I go over this incessantly on this channel. Saturn is the ancient Roman or ancient Latin name for Osiris or Asar, okay, or Amun-Ra, the hidden god. That is who the all black is meant to allude to or to venerate. That's why in the court system, the judges wear black robes. They're viewed as priests of Saturn or priests of Baal, who is the Semitic version of Saturn. In Greece, Saturn was known as Kronos. Kronos means the horned one. Hence the term Baal, who was the bull god, depicted with two horns.
Did the fame scare you?
Fame, yeah, but not so much that I get on a plane to Africa. Fame is not that kind of scary, but fame is a horrifying concept when it's aimed at you, At the end of the day, it's something you don't have that much control over. You just try to conduct yourself the best you can.
Well, you don't really have any control over it when you get to a certain level. You don't have any control. These people are viewed as corporate assets. As their value goes up, the scrutiny goes up. And he's kind of changing his story. He's basically saying he didn't go to South Africa to escape the fame. Well, that's not really what you said when you were on the Actor Studio, the renowned interview in which he basically stated what is happening in the industry, that Mariah Carey and Martin Lawrence had mental breakdowns. I'll tell you what happened. They were also monarch children. They were raised up in the programming. And eventually they went through their self-destruct. Martin Lawrence, for those of you who don't know, is a military child. He was born in Germany. Remember, they found him running through the street butt naked or almost butt naked, waving a gun. You guys remember the movie that Denzel Washington did, Ricochet? Remember, they kidnapped Denzel. They put him through a certain amount of torture. They tried to frame him, and he also was in the film running through the streets, looking crazy. And in the film, they had Denzel's character, while he was running down the street, he had on a pink bathrobe. What was that meant to allude to? The fact that Denzel was had bent over, that he was a homosexual. Not his character in the film, but in real life, that he had gone through certain homosexual rituals to attain stardom in Hollywood. Mariah Carey, MK Ultra programmed, Monarch Sex Kitten, right? Beta programming. Her handler is Nick Cannon, who also is under the programming, by the way. For those of you who don't know. And, for those of you who want to do your own research, look up Mariah Carey's sister, who stated that she witnessed satanic rituals. Her and Mariah were forced to engage in and witness satanic rituals when they were children growing up in Long Island. Don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself.
I started doing drugs when I was little, just like you, fellas.
For 2 seasons, his best was Comedy Central's Chappelle Show. Critically acclaimed and wildly popular.
Is anyone up for a game of basketball?
Prince is another one. I'll probably have to do a video on Prince, maybe down the line. Prince, he was certainly a pupil of Bacchus. He was a cross-dresser. He was a pansexual as well, right? Allegedly. But that's what he was. Rick James, also a venerator, a worshiper of Pan. There's a very, very well-known photo of him and Eddie Murphy. Matter of fact, it was at the end of the video, Party All the Time, where Eddie Murphy threw up the OK sign, the mudra, M-U-D-R-A, the mudra sign, the OK sign, which is 666. And Rick James threw up the Manu Cornuto, the horn sign for Pan, a.k.a. Cernunos, or Cernunos, C-E-R-N-U-N-N-O-S, I believe it's spelled. The stag god of the Celts, who was just the Celtic version of Pan. So, once again, to make a long story short, brothers, everybody who's anybody in that industry, they must worship the same gods. Period.
I wanted to talk about Prince, because that show was still one of the funniest ones.
And we tried to get Prince, and we were like, yeah, we got the sketch and stuff about you, and Prince was like, no. He's just like, no. But then he saw the sketch, and he loved it.
Yeah.
Game. Blouses. It was complete coincidence that the week the sketch came out, he got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame basically means that you're a high-level witch. It's like those people who get the Presidential Medal of Honor. If I remember correctly, that's what it's called. The one where the celebrities go there and they get the medal where the ribbon is rainbow. That's for Pan. Okay? When you see the rainbow, that is for Pan. Remember, like I tell you, brothers, every symbol has a left-hand meaning and a right-hand meaning. What does that mean? In the scriptures, we know that the rainbow is the symbol from the Most High that he's no longer going to destroy the world by a flood. But on the left-hand side, the rainbow represents the journey through the prism, through the doorway, right? Through the pyramid, from the physical world to the spiritual world. When I did that video on E.T., which YouTube did not allow me to upload, E.T., The Many Faces of Pan, I stated that E.T. was metaphorically Pan. That's why at the end of the film, when he left Elliot, he went back to his quote unquote planet or his world. What did he leave behind after the spaceship when it moved to go back out into outer space? It left the rainbow, because that symbolized E.T. going from the physical world back to the spiritual world. He was a manifestation of Elliot's subconscious. Remember during that film, he and E.T., they sat behind the shutters and they listened to Elliot's mother, who by the way was an MK handler. I believe her name is Dee Wallace. She's a high-level Buddhist priestess, if I remember correctly. But one of you brothers could look that up and correct me if I'm remembering wrong. But Dee Wallace, yeah, she's and she was reading the story of Peter Pan to Drew Barrymore, who also is a monarch child raised up in the industry. So that film was really about Elliot conjuring Pan. That's why, once again, the boys went out into the woods at the end of the film, being led by E.T., who was Pan. He taught them how to do what? How to fly, just like Peter Pan. He taught the lost boys how to fly. All right. So it's just one long and circuitous path, but it all comes together at the end like the Ouroboros serpent. It's just one big circle. You think you're going on one long path, but like I always tell you, brothers, it's all connected. And by the way, before it skips my mind, Aretha Franklin stated that Prince was killed, that he was given the Zika virus, which for those of you who don't know, the Zika virus was created by the Rockefeller Foundation for population control, all right, allegedly. But that's another video.
Mm-hmm. But even when you walked away in 2005, you were still working. It's just that we didn't know all the things that you were doing. You really stayed low.
Did you see that look on his face when she said what he was doing in 2005 when he stayed low? He started looking back and forth like he don't remember what she's talking about. Look, I've stated earlier in this video, could he be a clone? Who knows? I'm not going to state that. As far as I know, he could be the same person, just not remember. Program multiples, they have numerous what they call altars. Oftentimes with program multiples, they'll have a front altar that's based in religion, like Prince was Jehovah's Witness. Right? That was one of his chief altars, his forefront altar. You know, they like to program religious altars into the program multiples, you know, to hide what they really are.
I found an altitude I was comfortable with. Mm-hmm. You know, I found a way to do what I like to do and avoid some of the parts of it that I was uncomfortable with.
What were you uncomfortable with?
Well, I mean,
probably cannibalism, child rape, sacrifice, right? Human sacrifice, blood drinking, you name it. That's what they have to do at the top levels of that industry, believe it or not. When you look up the Bacchanalian rites, that is what they did. Right? When you ate the flesh, the cannibalism is in veneration of the death of Osiris. Remember, Osiris or Asar was chopped up. And they believe that when you eat body parts, you take in the essence of that person. So cannibalism comes from the commemoration of the death of Asar. Right? That's where that term comes from. Kana Baal. Right? He's a priest of Baal. Right? For those of you brothers who know Hebrew, right? Kahan or Khan, it means priest. Right? Kana Baal, priest of Baal. So when you are a priest of Baal, you engage in ritual sacrifice, and you also engaged in cannibalism, the eating of human flesh. And remember, they also engaged in the worship of Baal, the burning of children, which is where you get the holiday of Christmas from. But that's also another video.
well, I mean, if you look at me, right, physically, now I'm like 40 pounds heavier than I was when I did Chappelle's show. Welcome everybody to Chappelle's show. And people are like, how did you gain all that weight? By resting and eating and paying attention to myself.
Or just taking different drugs. The drugs they had you on back then probably allowed you to keep your weight down. Because, brother, it wasn't like, you've been in the industry since the early 90s. You always look like a crackhead. So, who knows? Probably your metabolism slowed down. Probably you're on different antidepressants or different drugs used to control your psychological state, allegedly. But there's a multitude of reasons why you put on weight.
I have actual relationships with my kids.
See him again, we'll pick her up.
I've been all over the country touring all my life, but I never saw anything. Now I've seen everything. I could talk to people. I had time to stop if someone said they liked me. It wasn't like I'd brush past them like I don't want to hear it. I had time to stop like, you do? You know what I mean? It's like, it was just like the way that I engaged the world was different. I'm starting to get to a point where I'd like my life to mean something.
Like when he came to Allen University in Columbia, South Carolina. He wanted to talk to the students.
Before they play what Dave is talking about, just pay very close attention to how he expressed himself. He speaks as someone who has never had the opportunity to see the world, and he was only famous from the early 90s. So what was he doing as a child that he never had an opportunity to rest or relax? Even in the early part of the industry, it was of his time period in the industry, it wasn't like he was getting bookings upon bookings upon bookings. In the mid 90s, Eddie Murphy was not quite as popular as he was in the 80s, but he was still getting most of the black comedic roles. So Dave Chappelle seems to be someone who finally has a chance to live a more relaxed lifestyle, because the onus is not being put on him by the entertainment industry to be the forefront. They've replaced him with Kevin Hart, who also is under the programming, by the way. I don't believe he was raised in it, but he's certainly under it now. There's no doubt in my mind about that, but I'll address him in another video. And I've addressed Kevin Hart numerous times before anyway. I had a Kevin Hart video that YouTube would not even let me upload. For those of you who were on my Patreon channel, and all my videos are free. If you go on Patreon, you'll see me on there. All my videos are free. I had the part 2 to the Kevin Hart video. He's certainly a venerator, a worshiper of Pan, as you have to be to get to the top level in the industry.
It's okay to be afraid, because you can't be brave or courageous without fear. The idea of being courageous is that even though you're scared, you just do the right thing anyway.
I agree.
So in 2004, I walked away from $50 million. And in November, I made a deal for $60 million. So, welcome back home, man. Thank you.
Netflix allows many of the celebrities who don't want to have to work directly with the more sadistic MK handlers in Hollywood to have an opportunity to, cut out the middleman and be able to make their own deals through Netflix. for now. So basically with these program multiples, they can run, but they can't hide. Please keep in mind that Dave Chappelle got his start on Star Search, which is basically a method to introduce many of the monarch children into the conscious of the American masses. That's why you see people like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Aaliyah, Dave Chappelle, Martin Lawrence. They all got their start on Star Search, Usher, because they were all raised up in the programming.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He also went to the church named after his great-grandfather, a piece of his family's history he wanted to explore.
Hi. I'm here to bail out my buddy. Oh, okay. Well, while you're here, you do fit a description.
Chappelle's own history is rooted in stand-up comedy. He started performing when he was only 14. Do you remember when you got your first laugh?
Yeah, first night I was on stage, I can remember who introduced me. I can remember what my introduction was. I can remember the whole
Let me
thing.
hear, let me hear.
This guy named JT Newton, he said, you know, folks, everybody starts somewhere. And tonight, this young man is doing stand-up comedy for the first time. He goes, and who knows? We may be witnessing the birth of a star. Please welcome Dave Chappelle. That was it.
Notice how quickly he fell out with his so-called partner of the Chappelle show, Neil Brennan. It's obvious to me that he realized that Neil Brennan, whoever that person really was, his job was to watch Dave Chappelle. It's obvious to me because with the way in which Neil Brennan turned on him when he decided to go to Africa and the way in which their quote-unquote friendship crumbled, it's rather obvious that Neil Brennan's job was to act as a handler over Dave Chappelle. And it states that Dave Chappelle started his comedy career at 14. It's very common for the monarch children, as I stated, to get started young. Eddie Murphy also got started as a teenager. Now, when exactly he was initiated into the rituals, who knows? But as I already stated, when you look at that video with Eddie Murphy and Rick James, Party All the Time, at the very end, they both throw up their hand signs. And when you watch the classic Eddie Murphy stand-up Delirious, when Eddie Murphy first walks out onto the stage, he throws up the Manu Cornuto double hand sign.
I did pretty good. I was screaming. It's like, that's all for you, kid. That's all for you. But they were treating like, you know, like I was in the Make-A-Wish Foundation or something. They just wanted to give me a little boost. But it was encouraging, man. And it felt so good. You know, you'll go through a million bad nights to get those good ones.
3 days ago, this was a place where animals lived and tonight it is a place where human beings will get drunk and throw up.
See, what these stand-up specials allow Dave to do is to create his own comedy and express himself how he wants without having to worry about being guided by handlers, aka producers and directors. Many of the higher level producers and directors, they are knowledgeable of how to access the keys of these assets. They say certain things or look at them a certain way, use a certain phrase to snap them into attention. Dave clearly was trying to escape that. And right now, I think that they're allowing Dave to build back up his name in case they want to remove him, so it doesn't look so conspicuous. If they had removed Dave after he turned on that contract, you know, over 10 years ago, it would have looked too conspicuous because he was basically a whistleblower. He was going on Oprah and the Actor Studio and talking about how wicked Hollywood was and what they wanted him to do and how he had turned it down. He was speaking very cryptically. He was not being very explicit in regards to what he was referring to. If you remember when he sat down with Oprah, Oprah was looking at him like, you know that right now there's a code red on you. Basically, if there was a thought bubble over Oprah's head, that's what she would have been saying. Oprah is a monarch child herself. She was programmed by Dr. William Thetford at the University of Milwaukee, if I remember correctly. But that's another video for another day. But Dave did a lot of talking, did a lot of whistleblowing, and it would have confirmed his statements had they taken him out back then. So, you know, some people are worth more dead than alive. I think Dave is worth a little bit more alive because, you know, after he turned on that deal, it was like, you know what, just let him float around. It's going to look too it's going to look too blatant if we kill him now.
His good nights now involve juke joints, part concert, part party, and all day.
You never go to a party where everyone shows up at the same time. But the juke joint is the kind of party where everyone shows up at the same time. And we start and we finish the night together. And it's just like, it's a very eclectic crowd.
What do you want us to feel in there?
It's like, you know, love and camaraderie.
And I'm sure that they have people at Yellow Springs or in Yellow Springs, Ohio, who are just there just to watch him. You know, he's worth too much for him to not be getting watched.
Kinship, you know. It's just a reminder, like, in my town is so small, you throw an event like that in town, it's the big dance.
Oh, and by the way, do you know that there's a baby picture of him being held by Muhammad Ali? Always, please keep in mind, the entertainment industry is very, very small. I'm not going to say that they had an idea of what Dave Chappelle was going to be from a baby. But once again, he does have a photo of him being held by Muhammad Ali when he was a little child, a little baby. I believe that he and Ali were, that Ali was hugging him or something like that. But you guys could probably look that up.
That small town is about 20 miles outside of Dayton, Ohio, and far away from the pressure of big city life. Are you ever out here at night walking?
Yeah, I'll walk at night, especially when I first get back from the road. It's nice out. Scary, too.
Why?
Raccoons, you can hear them like rustling in the woods.
You scared of raccoons?
Yeah, very much so.
Gail, if you saw a raccoon, your ass to be scared, too. All right? Some motherfuckers walk up on you on their hind legs, and if they're approaching you, you're in trouble because they most likely are going to have something.
Much so. That's an irrational fear that I just have.
So if we want to get to you, Dave, get a raccoon?
Yeah, I'm not scared of them like fear. Like if I see them out close, they freak me out.
Yeah, look, a raccoon is something that you don't want to show any fear. You don't want to be, but a raccoon is not a good sign if it's approaching you.
They're a little too bold. They got those hands.
The town is progressive and artsy.
Hey, man, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. That's good to see.
Progressive and artsy, that's code word for liberal coffee drinkers and a bunch of pansexuals living there.
Good to see you. Just one second.
A place Chappelle says he's treated like a neighbor, not a big star.
I'll stop by.
Are you calmer here?
Generally speaking, yeah. I have time to think about things.
Look at that flag in the background. They framed it like that on purpose. Once again, the rainbow is for Pan.
Things, and I think for a comedian, if you don't have time to think, you're just not as effective. But if you know, it gets a little corporate.
It's that corporate feel he left behind when he departed Comedy Central, where Key and Peele became the comedians to watch. I think there's a speculation that Dave doesn't like Key and Peele, or Dave thinks, okay.
No, I'm a fan of this show. You know, when I did Chappelle's show, there were certain conventions of the show that the network resisted. And I fought the network very hard so that those conventions could come to fruition.
We're looking for Clayton Bigsby. Look no further, fella. You found me.
The first episode, I do that black white supremacist sketch, and it's like,
White power.
but it's 10 minutes long. It should be 5 minutes long. Why should it be 5 minutes long? Like these types of conventions. I fought very hard. So when I watch Key and Peele, and I see they're doing the format that I created, and at the end of the show it says created by Key and Peele, that hurts my feelings.
Well, David, shouldn't hurt your feelings, bro, because you didn't invent anything. And nothing against you, brother. You're a very talented comedian. But Richard Pryor had a show very, very similar to Dave Chappelle's from the late 70s, and you can look it up. Some clips of it are on YouTube, and Dave Chappelle blatantly stole many of his ideas from that show. All right, for those of you who are not aware. Dave Chappelle stole most of his racialized comedy from Richard Pryor. And the Richard Pryor show that was on in the late 70s was a very, very clear blueprint that Dave Chappelle modeled his own show after.
I've been gone for a very long time. Surprise, it's me.
The signature pieces of his highly anticipated comeback, 3 multi-million-dollar Netflix specials.
You know, America has a racial hot seat. I think we can all agree that that's the truth. And we can also agree that that hot seat is traditionally occupied by African Americans in general, African American men in particular.
Dave, you tell jokes from everything.
Well, it's good that he highlighted that, because as I've stated on this channel incessantly, it's the so-called black man who's viewed as the, and that's nothing against the sisters at all, but the woman will never be viewed as a threat. She'll only be viewed as a pawn. Remember, in all societies, the conquered nation of people, the woman is viewed as a spoil of war. So they take the woman, they use her for their enjoyment, and they program her because the woman follows power. The man is the one to be feared because the man is a three-dimensional thinker when he's in his right mind, and he's the most likely to start a rebellion. Okay? That's why, once again, in Exodus, the 2nd chapter, Pharaoh said, kill the male children, right? Kill the male child. The females, you can let them live. The female is not a threat to the overthrow of any system or society. It's just not.
From race to politics, do you worry about crossing the line, or is there a line that you won't cross?
Although I can see that in recent years, that seat has been occupied by Mexicans, and I dare say Arabs. And we, the black Americans, would like to thank you both for your sacrifice and your...
Look, let me say this. It was very interesting in the aftermath of 9/11 to see so-called Arabs or people of Middle Eastern descent try to act as if they were in some form of a fellowship with the so-called African Americans or so-called blacks of the Western Hemisphere. You know, when people are afflicted, that's when they start looking for allies.
Comedy is weird. The line moves, it changes. But I think a lot of, especially in comedy, a lot of it has to do with intent.
And your intent is?
To make people laugh, to reconcile paradox. I'm like just openly, sometimes I'm just openly vent. I think that when you get to a certain altitude, there's more scrutiny over the things you say.
Oh, clearly. There's no doubt about that. There has to be more scrutiny over the things that you say, because the higher you ascend in altitude, the greater the influence that you have. So that means the greater the control that has to be exerted over you, because if you're going to influence people, you have to be influencing them with a message that is acceptable to the powers that be. And as I stated at the start of this video, that is one of the reasons why Dave Chappelle tried to flee the industry. He understood that as he ascended up the ladder, it wasn't just that he had to partake in Luciferian rituals. Now he was no longer considered human. He was just considered a corporate asset, like a robot, where he was being told how to depict himself, and he was being told what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. Please keep in mind, in 2005, Dave Chappelle was probably the most influential person over young people in America. His show was a sensation, at least in the television world. He was as influential as any rapper at that time period.
Because the platform is so powerful.
Nora, he's still hilarious. After I did this interview, I went back and looked at a bunch of Dave Chappelle shows. His comedy, to me, still holds up. You look at that black supremacist joke, which, especially in today's time, is really just kind of hilarious when you think about it.
Yeah, I like how he puts that comedy is to reconcile paradoxes.
Yes.
That.
Well, that's always been the purpose of the quote-unquote fool or the minstrel, or as he's called today, the comedian. The comedian's job is to say uncomfortable things in a comfortable way. You know, like they always say, it's not really so much what you say, it's how you say it. And I think that I touched on this in another video. The fool or the minstrel was allowed to say things to the king that no one else was allowed to say, because he was able to say it in an incisive manner, and with comedy to promote introspection from the king. And that's really the job of a great comedian. A great comedian is also a great social satirist and also a great social critic, and oftentimes a cynic. So sometimes you need cynical people around even though they tend to be rather extreme in their cynicism, to provide a counterbalance to many of the progressive ideologies that are being pushed forth or propagated in society. And that is the relevance of a great comedian. But anyway, let's see what else they have to say here.
He's a very smart guy.
Very
I think
smart.
most comedians are. I think that comedy takes a degree of intelligence to be funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because you have to be very, very observant. And you have to have the ability to not only be observant, but to translate those observances to people who are not observant.
He's a smart, very smart guy. Doing
Gil,
okay.
Kudos to you, because I know he does not give any interviews, and you got that interview after many years of...
That was 2 years of groveling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Can
kudos.
be very effective.
Kudos. Yeah.
Thanks.
It was worth it. It was a really good interview.
But anyway, that's it on Mr. Dave Chappelle. Hopefully everything goes well with him. We'll see. Peace.